Planet Mission Part 1 by David Claiborne, as read by the author. New chapters every Monday. The full novel is available on Amazon.com and other online retailers. Links in the description. Chapter 16. Full Gear. Fields and orchards surrounded the valley on all sides, so the missionaries could not encamp anywhere near the walls. They boarded the rover and drove back down the hill, where they chose the spot at which the valley had opened to show their first view of the city. It was beyond the fields, but near water. The forest and mountains provided cover, and the location had plenty of open space between the river and path. Importantly, they felt they could manage the plant life in the area and that it would not interfere with their efforts to make camp or cause more injuries with a little care. Junebug, who had become an expert at the Armatron, unloaded equipment. The others arranged and opened crates. Shelter was the first necessity. Mufasa supplied modular tents, strong fabric stretched over lightweight composite tubing to form a domed habitat. They first assembled and anchored a circular floor. 4 long tubes crossed in the center and connected to the outer ring. Over this they stretched a white PTFE shell. The result was a durable, well-insulated 4-walled shelter with enough room to walk around inside. The shelters had only one zippered entrance and no windows, though the PTFE shell, while opaque, did admit diffused light. They had enough shelters to pair up again. "You know, we had the same experience during the first expedition to the colony before you arrived," Tommy began as they set up camp. "We walked right up to the gate ready to enter the city, and it was like running with a stretch band tied around your waist. The more you struggled to get in, the harder it resisted. None of us could get in. We couldn't believe it then either. One of the specialists thought it must use a genetic coding system of some sort." "Right, a genetically mitigated authentication code," Junebug said, pondering how that might work. "That's it," Tommy said. "We must have spent days trying to get in, though we didn't try begging like you did. At least, that wasn't the first thing we did. We tried to override the system with a resonance-canceling signal. We tried hacking their networks. We even tried brute force driving a rover through the gate. About the only thing we didn't try was blowing the thing up, which would not have gone over well. It didn't matter what we tried, though. We never could get in. We eventually tried outright ordering them to let us in, but it made no difference. Either they would not let us in or they could not let us in." "When did you plan on sharing this information with the rest of us?" Jazzy scolded. Tommy shrugged off Jazzy's comment. "This way was more fun. Besides, would you really have believed me if I had said you wouldn't be able to get in?" "He has a point," Waters conceded quietly. Jazzy was not the type to accept anything she did not already know herself. Even after experiencing it firsthand, she was still not ready to accept that they could not enter a city. "There's nothing there. There must be a way in. They have to let us in," she muttered to herself as she finished unloading a crate and moved to the next, only to have the lid of a crate become stuck. "That mayor," she cursed, as she tried to force the lid. Bo moved to help her. "Your hands," he said as they popped the lid off. "What about them?" Jazzy said. "They're almost healed already. You were just injured a couple days ago," he said. "I've always been a fast healer. The inoculations Mufasa gave us probably helped too," Jazzy said. Junebug climbed onto the rover's tires and looked at his reflection in the glass. "My face is better too. It must be the Polus fruit. It was rumored to have terrific healing qualities." "That's impossible," Jazzy insisted. "Nothing could be that effective on its own without significant refining and study, including rigorous peer review. As far as I'm aware, no papers have yet even been written on the subject." "But just look," Jazzy cut Junebug off. "I won't hear anything else about it." "But it's my primary directive on this mission," he protested. "Nothing else about it," she repeated. Jazzy lifted some equipment out of the crate and carried it off to her shelter. Junebug walked over to help Bo. "I've already started writing the first paper, actually," he said. "When did you have time for that?" Bo said. "You know, while we were traveling," he said. "This Junebug guy is something else," Tommy said. "It was enough for the rest of us just keeping our lunch down." "I've decided to submit Vitis Polecimensis to the administration for consideration as its official scientific classification," Junebug said. "Naming it after yourself, are you?" Bo said, poking fun. I don't think Kim's Polus fruit would market very well at the grocery store, Tommy said. Junebug smiled. That's just for classification purposes. No one knows the Latin names of things anyway. I think we should just call them vitis. Like kiwis? Bo said. Like kiwis, Junebug acknowledged. Later that day, they finished unloading and setting up their shelters. They occupied themselves arranging their living quarters and workspaces. Look over there, Tommy said as they assembled portable furniture. Junebug's already set up his workbench. How? Bo asked. If he keeps making that workbench appear when none of us are looking, that guy's going to get a reputation as a witch, Molly said. There's no such thing as witches, Jazzy said. At least not magical ones. Jazzy shuffled around in a crate, found the screen she was looking for, and trotted off with it under her arm. Thank you, Jazzy, Molly said sarcastically after she had left. Junebug overheard them. These are amazing, he said from his workbench. These aren't individual plants. The entire vine appears to be connected and spans several square kilometers. It may even cover the entire planet. You mean moon, Bo said. Right, the moon. Are you familiar with aspen trees on Earth? They're a kind of poplar. They nodded. Well, an aspen grove is made up of many individual trees, but they share a common root system. New trees grow when the roots send up suckers, meaning that each tree is a clone of the other trees around it. Entire groves come from just one seed. The individual trees might only live through a few generations, but the root system can be ancient, thousands of years old, and span hectares and hectares, covering entire mountains. The vitis appear to behave the same way. The samples I collected here have the same genetic makeup as those we found near the space elevator. I need to do a larger survey, but if the vitis are really one enormous organism, it could be the largest living thing on the moon, possibly the largest organism ever discovered. Gather around, everyone, Waters said, approaching the other missionaries. He was wearing a full Mufasa envirosuit, including its heavy boots and gloves. He had a helmet under his arm. In spite of what Junebug may learn, I want everyone dressed in full gear like this any time we're outside to help protect against further injury. That means boots and gloves too. No t-shirts, tennis shoes, or casual pants outside of the shelters. You don't mean for us to wear the helmets too? Bo asked with a little despair. It wouldn't be a bad idea, Waters said, but I'm not going to require it. I don't understand how the colonists don't need the same protection, Jazzy protested. It's like they said. We weren't made for this world, and we haven't adapted yet, Junebug said. That mayor, Jazzy said. His name was becoming her favorite curse. They saw little of the mayor and his associates except by chance in the following days and weeks. The blossoms mostly fell from the trees to be replaced by tight flushes of growth whose colors were as varied as the flowers before them. Strange leaves of red, yellow, orange, blue, lavender, violet, magenta, and even the more traditional green, colors of every shade imaginable grew on the trees. Spring on the fourth moon of Polus threatened to fade into summer. Their first effort to enter the city proved a fitting start to the mission, which showed signs of the same degree of success. They tried persuading other colonists to let them in. When that failed, they tried other means of reaching the colonists. Yet still they made no progress. The people had little interest in hearing what they had to say, and the city itself sheltered them. The colonists could speed away on one of the 6-engine flyers or on a Polus bear, or even walk away, leaving the missionaries huffing for air and struggling against the grasses and plants. Just walking through a field was difficult. The moon itself seemed determined to impede them. Unable to enter the city and unable to keep up with the colonists, Jazzy and Waters planned to set up her medical clinic just outside the city walls. She would provide medical care, and Waters could use the opportunity to speak to the colonists. Jazzy was determined to set up her clinic in the plaza as close to the narrow gate as she could. She recruited Bo, Waters, and Tommy to help with the setup. Together they moved her clinic from the camp to a spot in the plaza near the city gate. They partitioned off the back as an examination and consultation room, and she opened shop. Molly's, Junebug's, and Bo's purposes were much more straightforward. They seemed to struggle less to work on their goals. Molly catalogued Polus's fauna. Patients and other colonists sometimes joined her. The animals in the immediate area and around the city alone would provide years of study, and Molly had plenty to keep busy. Curiously, none of the animals were domesticated, yet they neither feared the colonists nor posed any threat. To the contrary, the animals seemed to delight in their presence, and the people were happy to keep company with the animals. Junebug could not have been happier studying the plants around them, particularly the vitis, which he found fascinating. He had yet to successfully cultivate one of the fruits on its own, but that did not bother him. Instead, each failure led to a fascinating discovery. He sat with a bowl of fruit at his side as he studied at his workbench. Periodically, he trekked off with Tommy to gather more samples. His face, pockmarked since his youth, had begun to clear. He attributed this to a combination of the cleaner environment of Polus and the vitis themselves. Jazzy reminded him not to draw hasty conclusions until his work had been peer-reviewed and published. At first, Bo was intent on documenting everything, remembering his failure to capture the storm at the spaceport. As the days turned into weeks and the season began to drift into the moon's version of summer, he found there was simply not that much new to record, exactly as he had on the Arca. Instead, he helped Junebug and Tommy collect samples, sat with Jazzy in the clinic, or accompanied Molly on her explorations. Footage of animals was always worthwhile. They were a hit on the administration's broadcasts. And the animals here were surprisingly easy to capture since they did not flee. In fact, they walked right up to Bo and Molly, eagerly seeking pats and scritches, almost anticipating, even awaiting a command. This behavior was helpful because hiking off the path through the dense and rigid foliage remained a chore. Despite Waters' orders to wear additional protective gear, they still had to move carefully to avoid injuring themselves. For the same reason, the team remained limited largely to the area around the city and the path. Despite the limitation, there was plenty for them to do. Still, they grew frustrated at not being able to see the city or leave the valley.